Gryffindor House. Gryffindor is arguably the most well-known house at Hogwarts, not because it's superior, but because most of the story is told from its perspective. Founded over 1,000 years ago by Godric Gryffindor, the house is built on values of courage, honor, and moral decisiveness. But the full truth of Gryffindor House runs deeper than just boldness and bravery. To understand it fully, we need to look at its founder, its sorting logic, magical mechanics, and the house's long-term legacy, including its flaws. Godric Gryffindor was a skilled duelist and a principled idealist who believed magical education should be open to all, provided they had the courage and conviction to use it justly. He famously clashed with Salazar Slytherin, who insisted that only purebloods should be taught at Hogwarts. Gryffindor rejected that, arguing that lineage didn't matter, only integrity did. This ideological divide eventually broke the founding alliance and laid the groundwork for the school's most infamous rivalry. Gryffindor left behind two major magical legacies: the enchanted sorting hat, designed to embody all four founders' values, and the Sword of Gryffindor, a goblin-made weapon that only reveals itself to those who display true bravery. The sword, enchanted to absorb that which strengthens it, like basilisk venom, acts as a kind of magical validator. Gryffindor courage must be proven, not claimed. The sorting hat places students in Gryffindor not just for who they are, but who they're willing to become. The trait it values most is the willingness to act in the face of fear. This is why a student like Neville Longbottom, timid, insecure, and overlooked, could still be a perfect fit. Gryffindor isn't about confidence, it's about decision. The hat tends to favor impulsive thinkers who act on instinct, especially when their instincts are morally grounded. That's where Gryffindor overlaps, and sometimes conflicts, with other houses. Where Ravenclaw pauses to understand, Hufflepuff waits to include, and Slytherin plots the best path forward, Gryffindor moves. Whether or not it's wise. It's worth noting that students can influence their sorting. Harry Potter, who had traits of both Slytherin and Gryffindor, chose the latter. The sorting hat allows self-selection, but it takes a strong will to override its initial instincts. And Gryffindor often attracts those strong-willed enough to do just that. The Gryffindor Common Room is located in Gryffindor Tower, one of the highest points in Hogwarts. It's accessed through a sentient portrait that requires a password. This height isn't accidental. It represents aspiration, visibility, and the house's open alignment with action. Gryffindors want to be seen doing the right thing, not necessarily for praise, but because leadership demands presence. The house colors, scarlet and gold, reflect fire and glory. The lion mascot symbolizes strength, assertiveness, and symbolic rule. And the elemental alignment with fire ties into themes of passion, destruction, and rebirth. Fire purifies, but it also consumes, a duality seen in many of the house's members. The house ghost is Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, better known as Nearly Headless Nick. While his presence is mostly comic relief, he represents a kind of loyal stubbornness. He clings to existence, unable to fully pass on, simply because he wasn't properly beheaded. It's oddly on-brand. The Sword of Gryffindor, as mentioned earlier, is more than an artifact. It acts as a magical test. It will only appear to a true Gryffindor in a time of need, and never to someone who seeks it for glory. This detail reinforces the house's deeper theme. Courage must come from within, and it must be honest. Gryffindor has produced some of the most legendary figures in magical history. Albus Dumbledore, Harry Potter, Minerva McGonagall, Sirius Black, Lily Evans, Remus Lupin, and the entire Weasley family. Its alumni trend toward heroism, but also martyrdom. Gryffindors are often willing to sacrifice themselves for a cause, and while that's admirable, it also leads to strategic oversights. Many Gryffindors die not because they were unskilled, but because they chose danger when other paths were available. Gryffindor's strengths are obvious: courage, loyalty, initiative, and a moral compass that rarely wavers. But those same traits can also spiral into arrogance, recklessness, and binary thinking. The world isn't always split into good and evil, but Gryffindors tend to treat it that way. They're often the first to charge, the last to retreat, and the most likely to act without full information. In war, they make excellent leaders and terrible diplomats. They mean well, but meaning well doesn't always end well. Gryffindor is a house of instinctive action, of doing what feels right, no matter the risk. It thrives on conviction, but conviction without caution is a flame without control. It can light the way, or burn everything around it. Understanding Gryffindor means seeing past the hero narrative and recognizing its complexity. A house that trains warriors, inspires leaders, and occasionally creates legends, but never without a cost. Slytherin House. Slytherin is the most controversial house at Hogwarts, and by far the most strategically misunderstood. Founded by Salazar Slytherin, the house is built on ambition, cunning, and legacy. But to reduce it to the evil house is to ignore what it actually represents: the belief that magical potential must be maximized and protected no matter the cost. This is the house of long-term thinkers, political tacticians, and magical realists. Salazar Slytherin was a brilliant Parselmouth and a master of defensive magic and legilimency. Unlike his co-founders, he placed enormous emphasis on magical heritage, particularly the belief that only those of pure or half-blood lineage should be taught at Hogwarts. He feared that teaching Muggle-borns would dilute the magical gene pool and expose the magical world to danger. This belief, while discriminatory, wasn't entirely about status. Slytherin saw magical blood as a source of cultural preservation and strategic caution. It eventually led to a rift with Godric Gryffindor, who argued for broader inclusion. Slytherin left the school, but not before constructing the Chamber of Secrets, a hidden room containing a basilisk and a magical failsafe tied to his bloodline. It was a literal embodiment of his fear, that one day the school would need purging. Slytherin sorts students based on ambition, cunning, resourcefulness, and a strong sense of self-preservation. It doesn't require cruelty or arrogance, only the ability to plan, assess risk, and act decisively in pursuit of a goal. Slytherin House is about leverage, magical, social, or psychological. Many Slytherins are highly intelligent, but unlike Ravenclaw, they seek utility over theory. Where Gryffindor acts on principle, Slytherin acts on calculation. That doesn't make them evil, it makes them strategic. They think in terms of outcome, not symbolism. Slytherins also tend to form tight-knit internal networks. Loyalty within the house runs deep, but it's often merit-based rather than emotional. Trust is earned, respect is monitored, weakness is tolerated only if it has potential. The Sorting Hat has acknowledged that some students sorted into Slytherin do so by force of will, not by default. This is significant. The house doesn't just recruit dark talent, it attracts those who don't fit comfortably into black and white morality. The Slytherin Common Room is located beneath the Black Lake, in the dungeons near the Potions classroom. It's a low-lit, green-tinged chamber with high-backed chairs, arched stone ceilings, and serpent carvings throughout. The lake filters greenish light into the room, creating a mood of cold logic and quiet control. The entrance is concealed in a bare stretch of stone wall and requires a password, known only to house members. It's private, guarded, and deliberately inaccessible. Everything about the space reinforces exclusivity, secrecy, and inner-circle thinking. The house element is water, reflecting adaptability, depth, and intuition. The serpent mascot symbolizes knowledge, rebirth, and concealed danger. Contrary to its reputation, the symbolism isn't sinister. It's serpentine, coiled, careful, and poised to strike only when necessary. Slytherin's house ghost is the Bloody Baron, a silent blood-stained specter who murdered Helena Ravenclaw and then himself. He's feared by most students, even within his own house, and rarely speaks. His presence isn't meant to comfort, it's meant to remind students that power and obsession often walk together. Slytherin's lost relic was Salazar's locket, later turned into a Horcrux by Tom Riddle. The locket bore the serpent crest of the house and could only be opened by Parseltongue, further anchoring Slytherin's legacy in bloodline and exclusivity. The house remains tightly associated with ancient wizarding families, especially the Sacred 28. Names like Malfoy, Black, Lestrange, Rosier, and Gaunt are recurring presences in its student ranks, and, occasionally, its scandals. The house's alumni list reads like both a who's who and a watch list. Yes, it produced Tom Riddle, Voldemort, Bellatrix Lestrange, and Horace Slughorn, but also Severus Snape, Regulus Black, Andromeda Tonks, and Merlin himself. Snape's arc, loyalty through secrecy, is uniquely Slytherin. Regulus Black died defying Voldemort alone, and Slughorn, for all his networking and vanity, stayed and fought at the Battle of Hogwarts. Slytherins are often remembered for the damage they cause, but the truth is, they're usually the ones playing a longer game. When they fight, it's not for symbolism, it's for result. Slytherin's strength lies in vision. Its students are trained, implicitly or explicitly, to read the board, not just move the pieces. But this comes with risks: moral flexibility, elitism, and a tendency to overlook empathy in favor of efficiency. It's also the most self-policing house. Status matters. Competence matters. Fall behind and you'll feel it. The reputation for cruelty is overstated, but not unearned. The house's proximity to dark magic, bloodline supremacists, and institutional secrecy means it's spent centuries walking the line between legacy and infamy. Still, if every house represents a magical survival strategy, Slytherin's is the most pragmatic. Slytherin is not about evil, it's about edge. It teaches its students that the world is dangerous, that power is fragile, and that survival requires more than bravery or brilliance. It requires leverage. That doesn't mean its values are wrong, it means they're conditional. And if Hogwarts is a chessboard, Slytherin's the house that knows exactly when to move, and when to flip the board. Ravenclaw House. Ravenclaw is the house of wit, wisdom, and intellectual pursuit. Or so the Sorting Hat claims. But as with all Hogwarts houses, Ravenclaw is often misrepresented as simply the smart house. In truth, Ravenclaw's identity isn't just academic achievement. It's curiosity, eccentricity, and the belief that knowledge is an end in itself, not a means to power, not a path to glory, just truth for truth's sake. Rowena Ravenclaw was a brilliant Scottish witch and one of the most magically inventive founders of her time. She believed that intelligence and creativity were the highest virtues, not because they could be weaponized, but because they lifted wizardkind forward. According to legend, Rowena was responsible for designing much of Hogwarts' magical architecture, including its ever-shifting layout. Her most prized possession was her enchanted diadem, which granted enhanced wisdom to the wearer. Tragically, it was stolen by her daughter Helena and hidden in Albania, eventually becoming one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. The fractured relationship between Rowena and Helena casts a long shadow over Ravenclaw. It's a reminder that knowledge can enlighten or isolate. The Sorting Hat places students in Ravenclaw if they demonstrate a love of learning, original thinking, or a desire to seek knowledge beyond what's required. But that doesn't always translate to good grades or quiet study. Ravenclaw favors the curious and the unconventional, students who think laterally, challenge assumptions, and often prefer solitude over social hierarchy. They are independent thinkers. This means Ravenclaw can produce both charming intellectuals and insufferable contrarians, sometimes in the same person. The house doesn't prioritize usefulness or morality. It rewards the pursuit of knowledge, whether or not that knowledge is immediately applicable. That's what separates it from Slytherin, who learn to gain power, Gryffindor, who learn to act, and Hufflepuff, who learn to serve. Ravenclaws learn because they're driven to understand. The Ravenclaw common room is located in a tower on the west side of the castle, overlooking the mountains. To enter, students must answer a riddle. No passwords, no shortcuts. This isn't a trick. It's a filtration system. If knowledge is to be valued, it must also be earned. The tower setting reflects distance, not in an elitist sense, but in the intellectual sense of stepping back to gain perspective. The room itself is filled with arched windows, books, and celestial instruments. It's one of the most serene environments at Hogwarts, and one of the least supervised. The house mascot is the eagle, not the raven, often misunderstood. The eagle represents perspective, freedom, and high vision. Its alignment is with air, symbolizing logic, clarity, and the abstract. Ravenclaw's house ghost is the Grey Lady, Helena Ravenclaw, daughter of Rowena. She fled Hogwarts with her mother's diadem, then died at the hands of the Bloody Baron, who loved her. She now haunts the corridors with quiet dignity, rarely speaking unless approached with respect, or in Harry's case, with sincere need. The diadem itself is one of the most powerful relics in the wizarding world. It enhances the intellect of the wearer, though it's unclear to what extent. Its misuse as a Horcrux by Voldemort represents Ravenclaw's greatest fear, that wisdom can be corrupted by ego. Ravenclaw alumni include Luna Lovegood, Garrick Ollivander, Professor Flitwick, Cho Chang, and Moaning Myrtle. Each represents a different facet of the house. Luna's unorthodox worldview often made others dismiss her, but her clarity and independence of thought were unmatched. Ollivander's obsession with wand lore shows Ravenclaw's love of niche mastery. Flitwick demonstrates that intellectual discipline and dueling aren't mutually exclusive. The house has produced some of the greatest magical theorists, historians, and enchanters in wizarding history. But rarely its politicians or generals, Ravenclaws tend to avoid direct leadership unless they feel their knowledge is uniquely suited to the moment. Ravenclaw's greatest strength is independence of thought. Its members often approach problems from angles no one else would consider. But this can also be a weakness. The house sometimes encourages detachment, elitism, or intellectual superiority, even when unearned. Some Ravenclaws prioritize being right over being kind. Others retreat into theory when action is needed. They value logic, but not always empathy. The house isn't just bookish, it's ideologically agnostic. Ravenclaw provides knowledge. What you do with it is entirely up to you. Ravenclaw exists to remind the wizarding world that magic is not just power or tradition, it's mystery. Its students are taught not just how to cast spells, but how to question them, why they work, where they came from, and what they mean. In a school full of bold Gryffindors, cunning Slytherins, and grounded Hufflepuffs, Ravenclaws are the ones still thinking 5 steps ahead, or wondering if there's a 6th.
Names?
Professor Flitwick, you've known me for 5 years.
No exceptions, Potter.
Hufflepuff House. Hufflepuff is the most misunderstood house at Hogwarts, not because it lacks value, but because it doesn't seek attention. Founded by Helga Hufflepuff, this house was built on inclusion, fairness, and work ethic, not fame or glory. It doesn't market itself with flash or prestige, and because of that, it's often dismissed. But in truth, Hufflepuff is one of the most balanced, loyal, and ethically grounded houses in the school. Helga Hufflepuff came from Wales and was known for her warmth, inclusiveness, and practical magical skill, particularly in food-based charms and healing. Unlike the other founders, Helga didn't believe in exclusivity. She welcomed all students regardless of lineage or early aptitude, provided they were willing to learn and contribute. This core belief still defines the house's sorting logic today. Hufflepuff's ideology wasn't about being the best, it was about doing what's right, quietly and consistently. She taught the value of equality before status and results before recognition. It was Helga who brought house elf employment into Hogwarts, ensuring they'd be treated with respect. While the other founders debated legacy and lineage, Helga built a culture. Hufflepuff sorts students based on loyalty, patience, honesty, and a strong sense of fair play. It doesn't require genius or ambition, only consistency, effort, and moral stability. But that doesn't mean the house takes leftovers. In fact, Hufflepuff requires something harder to measure than intellect or boldness: reliability under pressure. Hufflepuffs are steady, the kind of people you want beside you when things fall apart. They may not act first or shout loudest, but they rarely back down from responsibility. The house tends to attract students with a strong internal compass, the ones who do the right thing when no one's watching, and who don't need to be told twice to help someone else. It's also the house least likely to produce dark wizards, according to historical data, a quiet but telling statistic. The Hufflepuff common room is located near the Hogwarts kitchens, behind a stack of barrels in a low stone corridor. To enter, students must tap a specific rhythm on a barrel, an act that combines rhythm, memory, and humility. Get it wrong, and you're doused in vinegar. Subtle, but effective. The space itself is low-ceilinged, warm, and filled with earthy tones, plants, and circular architecture. It reflects the house's alignment with the element of earth, groundedness, growth, and stability. Unlike other common rooms, Hufflepuff's is accessible, welcoming, and difficult to breach without humor. There are no riddles or passwords, just rhythm and patience. The house ghost is the Fat Friar, a cheerful, kind spirit who was executed by the church for performing magical healings without permission. His story reflects the house's ethos: kindness, practicality, and a quiet defiance of cruelty. While Hufflepuff has no famous enchanted relic on par with a sword or diadem, Helga's cup, later turned into a Horcrux by Voldemort, was a magical object believed to amplify healing magic and food-based charms. Its corruption into a Horcrux is ironic, the most nurturing object in Hogwarts history twisted into an instrument of death. Hufflepuff's most well-known students include Cedric Diggory, Nymphadora Tonks, Pomona Sprout, and Newt Scamander. Cedric exemplified dignity and fairness in the Triwizard Tournament, even when under immense pressure. Tonks, an Auror, shows that loyalty doesn't exclude boldness. And Sprout, the herbology professor and head of house, embodies steady, unflinching leadership, especially during the Battle of Hogwarts. Then there's Newt Scamander, a walking testament to Hufflepuff independence, compassion, and quiet brilliance. What these figures share is not ambition or acclaim, but a refusal to compromise their values. Hufflepuff alumni often go into healing, herbology, magical creature studies, or Auror work, fields that require patience, precision, and resilience. Hufflepuff's greatest strength is its consistency. Its members are durable. They show up, do the work, and stay until the job is done. But the house isn't without weaknesses. Its students may struggle with visibility, assertiveness, or confrontation. They can be overlooked, not because they lack skill, but because they don't demand attention. The house is often ridiculed as where the leftovers go, but that perception reveals more about the speaker than the house. In reality, Hufflepuff may be the most difficult house to fake. You can pretend to be brave, you can act clever, You can chase power, but you can't fake patience, or kindness, or reliability. Hufflepuff doesn't produce legends, it produces foundations. It's the house that supports the others when they fall, the one that works while others argue, the one that listens while others speak. It doesn't seek the spotlight, but when the lights go out, Hufflepuffs are still there, still doing the right thing, still standing.